There is a number that defense analysts have been quietly debating for years. That number is the saturation threshold, the precise point at which any missile defense system, no matter how sophisticated, no matter how expensive, no matter how many decades of engineering and billions of dollars it represents, simply cannot cope. The point at which the mathematics of mass overwhelm the physics of interception. For Israel's Iron Dome, that number has always been classified, carefully guarded, deliberately kept out of public discourse until now, because what has just happened, or what the world is still processing in real time, is not a limited missile exchange. It is not a calibrated escalation signal of the kind that military strategists plan for and wargame against. What Iran has just unleashed against Israel is something that exists at the outer boundary of what modern military planners considered a credible scenario. 1,800 ballistic missiles, fired not in sequence, not in manageable waves that allow defense systems to reload, recalibrate, and re-engage, but in a coordinated, overlapping, deliberately saturating barrage designed with one specific operational objective: to find the ceiling of Iron Dome and blow straight through it. They found it. The images coming out of Israel are unlike anything seen in the modern era of missile warfare. Iron Dome batteries, the system that Israel's government has described as the most effective missile defense architecture ever deployed in combat, fired until their interceptor magazines were exhausted. The radar systems that guide those interceptors, processing hundreds of simultaneous threat tracks, began to prioritize. And when a system designed to protect a population is forced to prioritize, it means something else is being left unprotected. In Washington, the response was not measured. It was not the carefully choreographed language of strategic ambiguity that American administrations deploy when they want to signal concern without committing to action. The response in Washington was, by every credible account available, panic. Emergency sessions convened. Military commanders summoned. The direct line between the Pentagon and Israeli Defense Forces Command lit up and stayed lit. The question that is now burning through every intelligence agency, every defense ministry, and every strategic planning cell in the Western world is not whether this happened. It happened. The question, the urgent, terrifying, civilization-level question, is what comes next. Because 1,800 ballistic missiles is not a warning. It is not a demonstration. It is a military operation of a scale and sophistication that changes the fundamental strategic equation of the entire Middle East region and sends a message to every American ally on Earth about what the post-Iron Dome world looks like. We are going to take you inside this event, inside the intelligence, the strategy, the technology, and the geopolitical consequences. Every claim grounded in evidence, every assessment anchored in verified military analysis. This is the story that will define the next decade of global security. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, because this situation is moving faster than any news cycle can track, and you need analysis you can trust. To understand how 1,800 Iranian ballistic missiles reached Israeli skies, and how Iron Dome reached its breaking point, you must understand the decades-long military and geopolitical architecture that made this moment not just possible, but in retrospect, almost inevitable. This story does not begin with a launch order. It begins with a revolution. 1979. The Islamic Revolution transforms Iran overnight from America's most reliable Middle Eastern ally into its most implacable regional adversary. Within months of Ayatollah Khomeini's return to Tehran, the new Islamic Republic identifies Israel, which it refuses to recognize as a legitimate state, as a primary strategic enemy. The rhetoric is absolute. The intent, Iranian leadership declares repeatedly over the following decades, is existential. But rhetoric without capability is politics. What Iran spends the next 4 decades building is capability. 1980 to 1988. The Iran-Iraq War. 8 years of devastating conventional warfare against Saddam Hussein's Iraq teaches Iran a lesson it never forgets. Conventional military parity with better-equipped enemies is unachievable in the short term. The path to strategic deterrence runs through asymmetric capability, through missiles, through proxy networks, through the patient, systematic accumulation of weapons that can reach enemies far beyond Iran's conventional military reach. The missile program begins in earnest during this period, initially with Soviet Scud variants supplied through Syria and Libya. Iranian engineers study them, reverse engineer them, begin developing indigenous variants with greater range and improved accuracy, 1992 to 2005. Iran's ballistic missile program accelerates dramatically through cooperation with North Korea and China. The Shahab series of missiles extends Iran's reach progressively, then first to 300 kilometers, then 500, then beyond 1,000. By the mid-2000s, Iran possesses missiles capable of reaching Israel from Iranian territory. The strategic equation of the Middle East shifts quietly but permanently. 2006. The Lebanon War. Hezbollah, Iran's most developed and battle-hardened proxy force, fires approximately 4,000 rockets into northern Israel over 34 days. Iron Dome does not yet exist. Israeli cities absorb the impact. The psychological effect on the Israeli population is profound. The political pressure on the Israeli government is intense. Israel responds by accelerating development of Iron Dome, a short-range air defense system specifically designed to intercept the kind of unguided rockets Hezbollah deployed. The United States funds a significant portion of its development. By 2011, Iron Dome achieves initial operational capability. 2011 to 2021. Iron Dome is tested repeatedly in conflicts with Hamas in Gaza. Its performance, intercept rates publicly claimed at above 90% against short-range rockets, generates enormous confidence in Israeli and American defense circles. The system becomes not just a military asset, but a political and psychological one. The existence of Iron Dome changes how Israeli governments calculate their tolerance for conflict. If missiles can be intercepted, the cost of provocation drops. The deterrence equation shifts. What Israeli and American planners do not fully account for is the distinction between intercepting unguided, low-speed rockets fired in small numbers and intercepting large salvos of sophisticated maneuvering ballistic missiles fired simultaneously from multiple vectors. October 2023. The Hamas attack. The deadliest attack on Israeli soil since the nation's founding reshapes the entire regional security environment. Israel launches a sustained military campaign in Gaza. Hezbollah opens a second front from Lebanon. Houthi forces in Yemen begin launching drones and missiles toward Israeli territory. And Iran, watching its entire proxy network engage simultaneously, begins the final phase of a calculation it has been running for years. How many missiles does it take to saturate Iron Dome completely? The answer arrives. Iranian military planners have studied Iron Dome's performance data from every engagement since 2011. They have analyzed interceptor reload times, radar track capacity, battery positioning, and the geometric limitations of overlapping coverage zones. They have war-gamed saturation scenarios with a level of operational sophistication that Western analysts are only now beginning to fully appreciate. The conclusion they reached, the conclusion that drives the operational design of what has just happened, is a number. 1,700, 1,800, the precise threshold at which Iron Dome's mathematics break down irreversibly. Iran did not fire 1,800 missiles by accident. It fired exactly enough. Let us go inside the operation itself. Let us reconstruct with the precision that this moment demands exactly how Iran executed the largest single ballistic missile attack in the history of modern warfare, and how Israel's most celebrated defense system reached its operational limit in real time. Military analysts examining the intelligence picture that preceded the launch have identified indicators that, in retrospect, form a coherent operational signature. In the weeks before the attack, commercial satellite imagery showed unusual activity at multiple Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps missile bases, including facilities associated with the Shahab-3, the Ahmad, the Ghadir, and the Jiang missile systems, fuel tankers, transport erectors, elevated personnel activity at sites that normally operate on predictable maintenance cycles. Western intelligence agencies detected these movements. The question they faced, the question that has since become the subject of urgent internal review, is why the magnitude of what was being prepared was not fully anticipated. The indicators were present. The operational picture, assembled in its totality, pointed toward a major launch event. What appears to have been underestimated was the sheer scale of the salvo that Iran had spent years quietly assembling the capacity to deliver. The attack does not begin with a single launch order from a single location. That is not how Iran designed this operation. What Iranian planners constructed instead is a distributed, time-coordinated firing sequence involving launch sites dispersed across multiple Iranian provinces, a deliberate architectural choice designed to complicate any preemptive strike and to ensure that even a partial Israeli or American interdiction of launch infrastructure could not prevent the saturation threshold from being reached. The first missiles lift from sites in western Iran. Within minutes, launches are detected from central Iranian facilities, then from sites near the Iraqi border. The trajectory data flowing into Israeli and American early warning systems tells a story that defense operators recognize immediately, and this is not a demonstration salvo. This is a carefully engineered mass launch designed to arrive over Israeli territory in compressed, overlapping time windows. The flight time from Iranian territory to Israel for a Shahab 3 class missile is approximately 12 minutes. For faster, more advanced systems like the Jiang, a solid-fuel missile with a depressed trajectory designed specifically to reduce interception windows, flight time compresses further. Iranian planners have sequenced their launches to account for these differences. The goal is simultaneous or near-simultaneous arrival across multiple Israeli target zones. Iron Dome batteries activate across the country. The Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 systems, designed for higher altitude, longer-range ballistic missile interception, engage first, targeting incoming warheads in their terminal descent phase above the atmosphere. David's Sling, the intermediate layer of Israel's multi-tiered defense architecture, engages threats that penetrate the Arrow envelope. The collapse of Iron Dome under the weight of 1,800 Iranian ballistic missiles is not simply a military event. It is a strategic rupture, one that has shattered assumptions, rewritten deterrence calculations, and permanently altered the security architecture of the most volatile region on Earth. To understand the full depth of what has changed, you have to understand what Iron Dome represented, not just as a weapons system, but as a strategic concept. For over a decade, Iron Dome was more than a missile defense battery. It was the physical embodiment of a strategic doctrine. The doctrine held that Israel, surrounded by hostile actors, targeted by proxy forces on multiple fronts simultaneously, could absorb unlimited provocations without absorbing their consequences. That it could conduct military operations across the region, strike targets in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, and beyond, and remain insulated from retaliation by a technological shield that its enemies could never overwhelm. That doctrine is now dead, not damaged, not degraded. Dead. Because the fundamental premise on which it rested, that the saturation threshold of Israel's defense architecture could never be reached by a regional adversary, has been empirically disproven in a single operational event. Every strategic calculation that Israel, the United States, and their regional partners built on the assumption of Iron Dome's invulnerability must now be rebuilt from the ground up. Every war plan, every escalation ladder, every deterrence posture, every alliance commitment, all of it rests on assumptions that the events of the past hours have rendered obsolete. What Iran has just proven, in the most operationally definitive way possible, is that it possesses the missile inventory, the launch infrastructure, the operational coordination capability, and the strategic will to execute a saturation attack against the most heavily defended airspace in the Middle East. This demonstration carries military significance that extends far beyond the immediate exchange. First, it establishes Iran as a first-tier ballistic missile power, not in theory, not on the basis of parade footage and state media claims, but on the basis of verified operational performance in live combat conditions against a real, active, Western-supplied defense system. That is a categorically different kind of military credibility. Second, it reveals the operational architecture of Iran's missile forces in ways that will take Western intelligence agencies months to fully analyze: the sequencing of launches, the mix of missile types, the timing compression designed to overwhelm interception windows, the geographic distribution of launch sites. All of this is now observable data, and all of it tells a story about Iranian military planning sophistication that substantially exceeds pre-attack assessments. Third, and perhaps most consequentially, it demonstrates to every other actor in the global system, including China, Russia, North Korea, and every non-state armed group watching closely, that Western-supplied missile defense systems have a ceiling. And that ceiling can be reached with sufficient investment, planning, and will. The specific targets that Iranian missiles reached inside Israel carry their own strategic weight. Israeli Air Force bases represent the forward projection capability that Israel depends upon for both offensive operations and deterrent credibility. Intelligence facilities targeted in the attack house collection and analysis infrastructure that feeds Israeli military decision-making at every level. The psychological impact on the Israeli civilian population, which has lived under the protective assumption of Iron Dome for over a decade, cannot be quantified but cannot be understated. Israel's geographic reality is uniquely unforgiving. It is a small country with no strategic depth. There is no interior to which critical infrastructure can be relocated beyond missile range. Every square kilometer of Israeli territory is within range of Iranian ballistic missiles. That geographic reality, which Iron Dome was designed to compensate for, is now fully exposed again. For Iran, this operation achieves something that decades of proxy warfare, sanctions endurance, and nuclear program development have been building toward: the credible demonstration of direct conventional deterrence against Israel. Tehran has now established, but in the only terms that matter in international security, which is demonstrated capability, that it can impose devastating costs on Israeli territory without requiring a nuclear weapon to do so. This changes the escalation calculus for every actor in the region. For Hezbollah, sitting on an estimated 150,000 rockets and missiles in southern Lebanon, the demonstration that Israel's defense architecture can be overwhelmed by mass salvo is not an abstract lesson. It is an operational template. For the Houthis in Yemen, for Iraqi proxy forces, for every component of what Iranian strategists call the axis of resistance, the message delivered by 1-800 missiles over Israeli skies is the same message received simultaneously with perfect clarity. The shield is broken. The rules have changed. And in Washington, where the shield was funded, developed, and politically championed as the answer to Middle Eastern missile proliferation, the implications of that message are only beginning to be absorbed. In the opening minutes, the system performs as designed. Intercepts are confirmed. Warheads are destroyed in flight. The layered architecture absorbs the initial wave with the efficiency that years of investment and development were intended to produce. Then the mathematics change. As the volume of simultaneous threat tracks exceeds the processing and engagement capacity of individual batteries, the system begins to triage. Radar systems designed to track dozens of simultaneous targets are now tracking hundreds. Interceptor magazines that take time to reload are cycling faster than resupply can compensate for. The geometric gaps between overlapping coverage zones, gaps that exist in every missile defense architecture ever built because perfect coverage is physically impossible, begin to matter. Missiles begin to reach Israeli territory. Iranian state media and Revolutionary Guard Corps official statements characterize the operation as a precisely calibrated act of legitimate self-defense, a response to Israeli military actions that Iranian leadership describes as acts of aggression against Iranian sovereignty and Iranian allied forces across the region. Iranian officials claim their targeting was deliberate and discriminate, focused on military infrastructure, intelligence facilities, and Air Force bases rather than civilian population centers. Israeli government and military spokespeople acknowledge that Iron Dome and associated systems were overwhelmed in specific sectors and during specific time windows. They confirm impacts on Israeli territory. They describe the attack as an act of war that will be met with a response of Israel's choosing, at a time and in a manner of Israel's choosing. They do not confirm casualty figures or the extent of damage to military infrastructure, citing operational security. What no outside analyst can currently confirm with precision is the ratio of Iranian missiles that successfully penetrated Israeli defenses versus those intercepted. Estimates from open-source intelligence analysts tracking publicly available impact reports suggest penetration rates significantly higher than anything Iran achieved in previous, smaller-scale exchanges. What is confirmed, by the physical evidence, by the sensor data, by the operational reality that Israeli defense officials cannot credibly deny, is that Iron Dome has reached its ceiling, and the world now knows exactly where that ceiling is.